there, Santa Claus?
Well, speaking of mythical things in movies, one of the things I do
You
want to
mean
talk about
besides my
today,
life? What was that?
I said, speaking of mythical things in movies, what we want to talk about today, for a little bit at least, is classical movie monsters. And by what I mean by classic is basically, just to be safe, let's say pre 60s. Anything pre
So
60s,
you're talking about at least the big three: vampire. I'm vampire slash Dracula, werewolf, and Frankenstein.
right. And preferably if the film's black and white, but there are some color jobs that kind of sneak in there. Um, and so, like, some of my favorites off the top of my head, of course, I'm gearing up for Blob Fest, would of course be The Blob, because there's always a certain charm about watching 30-year-old teenagers try to outsmart a monster that's destroying their hometown. And while they're secretly smoking between takes, but you can see the smoke rising up from behind their shoulders. It's the greatest
Oh,
thing
you mean
ever.
besides the movie that's in my voodoo collection, Reform? I don't believe I have to say it's not a porno. It approaches the softcore porn line and just stops. It's the movie's called Reform School Girls.
Is it from the 40s and 60s?
No,
50s and
it's from
60s?
the 80s.
Oh,
Everybody, it's one of those films that I think out of everybody playing it, maybe it's supposed to be everybody that's all the women that are in it are supposed to look like they're like 16, 17 years old.
but they're not.
But no, half the cast, like three of the main cast that they focus on are again supposed to be looking like they're 16, 17 years old. They look like they're 43.
Well,
Legitly.
in
Go
The
on my
Blob, you got
voodoo.
Steve McQueen. Steve McQueen, okay?
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
He's well over at least 28 when that movie came out, so he's close to 30. His female co-star though is at least 18, and I'm just sitting there should I call the child line? Do we need to put him on some sort of predator list? I mean, what's going on?
But you got to figure, Keanu Reeves was in his mid 20s when he was playing Bill and Ted, the first one.
Yeah, whoa.
Whoa. But still,
But like for me, like I said, Blob takes top bill after that. And I know it's going to make 1,001 fanboys cry for saying this, but yes, The Beloved Alien is a remake. I also enjoy It, The Terror from Beyond Space, which is the original Alien, which Dan O'Bannon admits to heavily cribbing from to create the script for Alien. And a lot of people don't know that.
I don't think I've seen that. I got some
It's
creepy stuff in there.
free on YouTube. And it's
Yeah.
a slog, but when you watch it underneath the concept that, hey, this is kind of like the basis for Alien, it starts to add up.
I know there's a lot of stuff that I was watching as a kid that I have no idea what the movie was or anything like that. Just that it was, I'd be watching it and folks would come in and it's like, grab the remote, nope, click. I was getting invested in that shit. What the hell? I want to curse when I was like 5 or 6, and that I should say 6 to 10 range. Um, not really knowing what it is, but I was like getting invested in it.
Yeah.
I remember, it seemed like an interesting storyline. I wanted to watch it. Granted, when you're 6 to 10, if it gets a little bit too creepy, and you got a remote, you're going to change the channel.
One of
Um,
the earliest films that Willow saw that had always had an impact on them was Them, with the giant
yeah,
ants.
I
And
enjoyed that.
yeah, and it was interesting because I actually on the computer still to this day I have where I can take a standard like DVD or Blu-ray and I can convert it to Anaglaph 3D, which is the red and blue. And for them at the time, it was really, really cool. And they'll bring up the fact that, hey, can we watch Them this weekend? Because it's been a while. There's even a remake of that getting ready to come out, which I'm kind of curious how they're going to adapt nuclear powered giant ants in the modern times.
one, I hope it's rated R because there's a couple of scenes that I would love to probably see in rated R
Hmm.
because then, like, you see one of the ants bring out like a rib cage and
Yeah.
just toss it down, and you want to see a little bit more meat to it, pun intended, as they drop it down. But you have wonderful movies like that that was kind of brilliant. Yeah, it's cheese, literally American grade cheese. And I love that type of movies. Yeah, they're not scary now, but if you probably showed, the boomer generation, if you will, uh, even a slash movie now, like I'm talking like like Nightmare on Elm Street
Right.
type of ordeal, they would shit their pants. They would literally shit their pants because they're not ready for that. They're not level for that type of gore or anything like that. Because Frankenstein, werewolf,
The
the
Mummy.
the mummy, all that was in Dracula, all that was kind of terrifying for them. And
Yeah.
so,
And a lot of that stuff
uh,
came from classic lit, like The Invisible Man. That was H.G. Wells, you know.
and no, not
I think it
Dracula.
was H.G. Wells, wasn't it?
Frankenstein was, yeah, I think it might have been. Folks, in the comment section down below, let us know. Correct
Bram
us on that.
Stoker's
And
Dracula was kind of
uh,
a very much a drag when you read it, 'cause it's basically a journal.
it,
Um, and I wish
but
they would.
first time was it's revolutionary because it
Yeah,
was
yeah.
read like a journal. Uh, you see it in creepypastas nowadays in that type of ordeal.
And they
You
should.
can
I,
get
I
that.
would love to see a modern adaptation of Dracula that's handled in the journal format. That would be interesting, but you definitely would need to modern it up. But when it comes to
Check out,
Drac, he was nothing but a
check out.
ripoff of what was his name? You had Carmela, which was like the best vampire slash lesbian story ever, and the fact that they were making movies about Carmela in the 40s, 50s, 60s, and 70s still cracks me up because nobody gets the lesbian subtext with that movie, and nowadays it just
Let me
slaps you
say this.
across the face.
Check out John Johnson's Alucard, Darkstone's Alucard. It's
Okay.
pretty much it's based on the book Dracula, so it's
Hmm.
going to have that element, but it's not like the overly productive uh, production that was Dracula. So you're going to have a little bit more different context to it, and it's low budget. He does a decent job on it. I wish I had a copy to loan you. You might find it on either Tubi. I think he has an extended version on YouTube going way back.
Speaking of
I'm
them,
sure you could find it.
with giant killer ant movies, there's a movie right now sitting on Tubi, which is based on the classic PC and Sega CD game. It Came from the Desert, and it's kind of like a sequel to that game, and it deals with giant ants that raid this like, what do you call those dirt bikes that people ride around the desert? Well,
I
there's
know what you're
people out
talking
there
about, but
racing.
motorbikes, I think, whatever.
Yeah, but they're out there
Mountain
racing.
bikes, motorbikes, whatever.
Yeah, and they decide to have a giant kegger because there's supposed to be an action movie star to come out
Yeah,
to
I've
help.
seen that movie. I've seen that movie. I've seen
Yeah,
that movie. It was supposed to be a sequel. Um,
to the game.
yeah, I thought it was supposed to be a sequel to them.
No, it was a sequel to the game. It Came from the Desert, which was a PC game and also a Sega CD game. And it was very interesting because the game kind of took place in the 60s or the 70s. And the main character was kind of like your classic greaser biker dude.
But if you want to talk about strictly large animals or overgrown animals,
King Kong?
no, I'm not talking kaiju. King Kong is
Is
huge, but he's kaiju. He's
Is he really
kaiju
kaiju in
level.
the original ones? Because if we're talking scale, he's kind of dwarfed in comparison to the likes of Godzilla and the rest of the kaiju. He's
Well,
not
if you
that
want to look
big.
at it like this, if you want to go by the classics, the black and white stuff, Mighty Joe Young was way shorter, not even thigh high to King Kong.
Right. But you also have to remember that Mighty Joe Young was initially meant to be a sequel to King Kong.
I didn't know that, but I did. At least I did bring up a favorable comparison in regards to classics.
That remake was awful.
Oh no, I'm not talking about the remake. I'm talking about the original.
Original.
But I'm talking still 80s. Food, large animals like They Live. Not They Live. Them. Large animals.
What was the one with the giant mantis in it? Or was it just called the Giant Mantis?
Might have been Giant Mantis. Yeah, it was 50s. Lacking creativity, guys. But still, visual creativity, yes.
You know, Tarantula, the movie with the giant tarantula.
Yeah, Tarantula. But
no, overall, like Clint Eastwood was in that movie, and a lot of people don't realize that.
And Shatner was in another one similar to it too.
Kingdom of the Spiders.
Who knows?
But there wasn't giant spiders.
I'm talking about the movie called Food of the Gods and Food of the Gods 2.
Oh yeah, Food of the Gods. That was Burt Gordon, wasn't it?
Yeah, I have it on my Vudu.
You got the second one?
No, they don't have it. Or else I would have picked it up. I would have loved that.
Because I vaguely remember the Exterminator in that kind of having a very Clint Eastwood type character arc, and I kind of want to watch it just for that.
And who can't forget the second one wasn't really alligator. I think it was
Alligator and Alligator 2. The mutation.
The sequel, the mutation wasn't really that big anyway, but still, it was an overly large alligator.
Yeah, but it was fun to watch that dude who was like an alligator expert made sex noises at that news reporter. I can rewind that clip and just crack up for hours because he's all like, like,
but it's part of my large animal collection. If I want to do a movie marathon, it's like, what are you gonna do? Large animals. It's gonna be Alligator 2, Them, They Live, Them. I don't know why I keep saying They Live.
Empire of the Ants.
Empire of the Ants. I don't think I have, but I should have
Taylor in that.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, it's one of them women with the long dark hair. It was kind of like a sex idol back in the day.
Late 70s, early 80s, or something like that.
Yeah, but again, mostly it's the black and white ones that I enjoy.
Really, they cover up so much. The black and white stuff.
Like even the ones that are colorized are fun. Look at Valley of the Gwangi.
I might have seen that, but
this circus discovers like this hidden valley, kind of like out in the desert in Native American lands. That's full of dinosaurs, and so they try to incorporate the dinosaurs into their circus, and of course, chaos ensues.
Oh, that's like half the movies from the late 50s, early 60s as well. Oh, we're going to fly down this mysterious tunnel, and all of a sudden, it's the land that time forgot.
Well, they kind of made fun of Valley of the Gwangi in that one episode with Principal Skinner saying he's going to, quit. He's going to make the American novel, and he's going to call it the Valley of the Clonosaurus, and like a poo kind of reams him for Valley of the Gwangi in Jurassic Park. It cracks me up.
But the classics, you can't knock the. There was original. Unlike today, there is very little originality. It's all the jump scare. It's got to be PG. Granted, yeah,
there are
in a way,
PG horror that does have some balls to it.
I'll agree with that, but nothing beats. I'll put it like this. I hope you can agree. 80s PG, nothing compares to 80s PG when it comes to today's PG.
Exactly, because Monster Squad is a PG movie, and that still rules. Because what does Wolfman have?
Nards. But what I'm talking about is like you have it got so you have to figure, ladies and gentlemen, or other that might be watching. You have to figure the PG went so hardcore in the 80s that they had to develop a PG-13 rating. Just to clarify. Again, I bring up.
I saw that Brandon Tenold actually has in his like merch collection T-shirts that's PG-13. What the fuck happened to this rating?
You have to figure Sheena, Queen of the Jungle, she walks out of the river full frontal, and it's rated PG, ladies and gentlemen. Full frontal. We're not talking uh Return of the Living Dead while she was just wearing like a dancer's skin colored thing from the waist down. No,
Moleskin.
she was what?
That's actually the name of it, Moleskin.
Moleskin thing on from the waist down to cover things up. No, we're talking full frontal, full. I wish I was not distracted to actually time how long it was, but still, it was long enough to notice.
I like it spooky.
It's like, what's the difference between R and PG from the 80s? Maybe blood and gore.
You can only say fuck once before you are
Right.
no longer PG-13. That's the difference. You get one cuss word, you better make it worthwhile. But no, like 50s and like early 40s and 50s horror is where it's at. I just think it's funny, like looking at Universal trying to recapture their past glory of having shared universes. Because like the early monster movies crossed over a lot. And I'm not
Yeah, you
talking about
had
Abbott Costello meet the Wolfman and Frankenstein, even though that was a Universal joint, but there still was crossovers in
yeah, I'm
Universal.
talking. Folks, we're talking. Frankenstein meets the Wolfman, or Wolfman meets the.
But they
I
also did
think
Abbott and
Frankenstein.
Costello meet Frankenstein and the Wolfman.
Yeah, but I think I also remember it was like
Or was it
Frankenstein
Frankenstein and the Mummy?
versus and Wolfman, because I think that was the thing, because
Yeah, they had it
the
separate. There
guy,
was two different movies. Yeah.
because if I remember the movie correctly, the guy who played the Wolfman wanted to. He felt that the only way he could truly
Lon
die
Chaney.
is Lon Chaney felt that he could truly die is that if Frankenstein's monster killed him, or something along those aspects. But you still had that
Monsters
whole
never die.
good monsters never die.
Never die.
Uh,
They always come back. And that's what I always loved about it. But what I think is so funny is because like here's Universal. Like many of the movies that you've mentioned or I've mentioned have roots with Universal horror, even though mine's more obscure. Granted, Blob is Paramount. I want to say It, the Terror from Beyond Space is RKO. And them, I don't know if that's Universal or not. I'll have to look it up. But the heavy hitters, Dracula, Frankenstein, Wolfman, the Mummy, though Creature from the Black Lagoon, we can't forget Creature. Um, but those were the heavy hitters. They were all Universal. They were part of a shared universe. Invisible Man also. Don't
right.
mean to leave him out. And the sad part of it is now like Universal keeps trying to create a dark universe and keeps failing because
Or
they
they just
don't
keep
get
screwing
it.
it up. They screwed it up.
Well, first you had the Wolfman remake that they did, I want to say around like 2010 or something like that.
Right.
And it was an okay movie. Benicio del Toro did a great job, but it was no Lon Chaney. Um, then you
Then
had
you had
Dracula Retold. Awful, awful, awful. And
then
then,
you
of
had
course, recently you had that Mummy remake with,
Tom
what's his
Cruise.
name? Little
Tom
short
Cruise.
guy at the
Tom
Scientologist.
Cruise. Tom
Had
Cruise.
Tom Cruise in it. And the only thing that ever hit so far has been Invisible Man. And they're still kicking around, well, how do we get this to make further Dark Universe movies? And I'm kind of like, you need to go back to what you did in the 40s. Just fucking have fun with it. Stop with the
Right.
continuity. Let the script writers figure out how both of these things are going to come at each other and worry about it from there. Do not turn this into League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. That was awful. If you want to have
That's one
fun
thing.
with it, make it The Mummy with Brendan Fraser.
I will say this. I'm sure you can agree. Monster Squad was very enjoyable.
Yes. But I
Very
don't want a
enjoyable. It's
Monster
going to be.
Squad remake. I do not want that.
A lot of folks I'll agree with you. I don't want to see a remake because it's going to mess up they're going to probably mess it up some way. It's going to be hard to do it the way they did it back then. Um, I like how he did it, how everybody kind of, even the father kind of turned himself around. He was supportive. You can, if they kept it a little bit, I could almost see the main role of the leader of the group being, instead of it being the older child being a boy and the younger child being a gal, a girl, brother, sister relationship, it being the reverse in a way. They could almost do that and a little bit peppered, but it depends on who, what, when, where, and how. But with the monsters, I think the only weak link would have been Creature, drop Creature.
Well, that's the problem because they were going to do a Creature movie. There was going to be a Creature remake. And initially, believe it or not, they offered it to Guillermo del Toro, which would have been epic. And then they pulled it from him after like Dracula Untold failed. And what was funny, because Guillermo del Toro took what his concept was going to be for the creature and turned it into Shape of Water with another studio. And look at all the friggin' acclaim that movie got.
Right. But what
They
I'm talking
could
about
have
in
had
regards
that
for,
at Universal.
it's like with the, in my head canon, in regards to a Monster Squad remake, in regards to the monster ends of the stick, drop Creature. He was pretty, for the most part, he was useless.
Yeah.
Keep the two heavy hitters, the muscle, Frankenstein's monster,
Wolfman.
and, and Wolfman. Keep Dracula, but in regards to the Mummy, though it might seem a weak link, you power scale it a little bit. You power scale the Mummy. Use the same similar concept to the Tom Cruise Mummy. You make the Mummy female a little bit and make her a little bit of a magician. That way, the Mummy has a little bit of power scale to her as well. That way, for whatever is lacking without Creature, you now have the additional threat, and you could have a little bit of a love aspect between Dracula and the Mummy, two immortal beings right there, in a way, keeping each other, because you could have a dynamic there and add a little bit of, it's not just getting to steal the talisman to rid all good, it's going to keep them even more immortal and even more powerful.
Yeah.
And so you have that, then you have the whole good dynamic to do what they do. But it's touchy feely, and the way things tend to happen nowadays, it would be a bomb fest. It's very rare that you see something that they do. Monster Squad is obscure. It's a classic, and it's obscure. It's not on the level of Battle Angel obscure, but it's obscure. And they did,
You
I'll
know,
say this, depending on who touches it, Battle Angel, like I said, Battle Angel was a very good film.
yes. You could, like, for example, because Invisible Man did well. It did better than what it should have. And obviously they do have an Invisible Woman planned, which could be interesting. Um, but if they want to build from that, they would have to kind of keep it grounded in realism. You could probably do a Frankenstein story of a monster crafted from undead flesh run amok. It could work if underneath a realistic scope. Dracula, you could take a completely different take on that. The Mummy is where things get kind of weird because a while back, before they made Brendan Fraser's The Mummy, it was going to be Clive Barker's The Mummy, which I think was a missed opportunity. And Universal still owns the right to that script. I think they need to sit down with Mr. Barker and finally unleash Clive Barker's The Mummy. I think that could be fun. If you can find copies of the script online, but imagine Hellraiser meets The Mummy.
that could probably toss new life. And if they want to still try that whole aspect of the dark universe thing, it could actually probably breathe new life into it if they do go that route.
Yeah, because I think
And
Clive
just not
Barker is the right person to kind of tap nowadays to kind of do a horror that modern audiences are going to latch on to. So yeah, that would work, you know. Hell, I would say if Crichton was still around, get Crichton to do the Frankenstein remake, have him write and direct. But of course, he passed. I want to say around 2010 or something like that. Because with his science and his medical background, I think he could bring you know, a
what
good
about
thing
Robin
to.
Cook?
What's that?
What about Robin Cook?
Robin
He
Cook
doesn't.
might, or the person that helped Guillermo del Toro write The Strain. I think that would be another person who could kind of bring some reality to the Frankenstein lore.
Like I said, it depend. Like we said, can agree on. It depends on who's taking it and how they take it. It could breathe new life into a lot of good old stuff. Um, Again, both of us could probably agree when the Mummy was in essence remade with Brandon Fraser, it was done very well, and
Yes,
it's
and it was well for
it's
that time. I don't think a
and nowadays
continuation would work now.
now even though we had the Easter egg in the Mummy with Tom Cruise with the Book of the Dead,
Yeah, but we also had an Easter egg for the Mummy in that horrible, horrible G.I. Joe movie.
right?
Because Brendan Fraser's character was a descendant of what's his name from the Mummy movies. And it's one of those blink and you'll miss it type things.
Uh, it's do I want to see some stuff like that? But let's yeah, but it'll never happen because folks at Paramount, Universal, etc.
Nobody wants
They
to
want
play together.
no one wants to play together. Number one, number two, uh, they want it to be PG because it's strictly. Oh, we gotta make sure everybody's hat is able to see it. No, bring back the hard R stuff, man. Bring it back.
I mean, come on, like
Blood gut
look at Hellraiser. Let's just put it that way.
was the Hellraiser remake R.
The original was R. I think the remake was too, because it was on Hulu.
So if it's R, bring back blood, guts,
I'm
gore.
surprised that they even do rating with streaming. Because when Rob
It's
Zombie did Three from Hell, he purposely did not put that in theaters except as one of those like events at certain theaters. What's it called where they do like certain events? It's not AMC, it's
like
RC that does it.
I know Regal Events does like Regal
There you
does
go.
something like that. It's like Regal Events. Um,
But Three from Hell before it hit anywhere, Rob Zombie
I
wanted it
know,
done as an exclusive as so it could be unrated. And to me, it's like I'm surprised streaming can't be unrated.
true. Plus, you have if no streaming place wants to take it, it's a horror movie. I'm sure Shutter would take it up at least.
Yeah, because
They're
look at
horror
some of
centric,
yeah, but Shutter also has a huge hard on for IFC Midnight if you haven't noticed. I
but
think they have an
it's a
exclusive first run thing with IFC Midnight.
it's still it's an option that's out there. It's like
I don't want a
gone are
Universal
the
streaming
days.
channel.
You, you and I come from a time from where in the 80s and 90s. You were born when
78.
78. You're 3 years younger than I am. It That's the thing. 80s you had a lot of weird. Yeah, it was slasher dominated, but you had a lot of weird shit.
Yeah.
You had stuff like Food of the Gods. You had witchcraft. You had uh,
You had the most
ghoulies.
epic hardcore Disney movie ever.
Black Hole.
No. And it's something that even Disney Plus doesn't have up yet, and it kind of pisses me off. It's based on a Ray Bradbury story.
Oh. involves a carousel.
Yeah, something wicked
I
this
know
way
the
comes.
yeah, I remember that the whole scene in that where the guy in charge takes the
The hands and
grandfather's
squishes
hand.
it,
The hand, yeah, that freaked me out as a kid. Like, oh,
and that was
not
Disney.
really freaked me out. Not freaked me out. It's just like, ugh, uh, what's this movie? Oh, this something wicked this way comes. I'm not watching this. I'd rather watch
Good.
Poltergeist again. But it was a good movie.
Oh, so there's a debate for you when it comes to Poltergeist. Who really did it? Is it a Toby Hooper movie, or is it Spielberg, or is it both? Because there was a
Uh,
and I will kind of say that there was a huge director's like issue back in the day when that movie came out, where a director could only have so many movies out a year. And so a lot of people believe that Spielberg heavily influenced Toby Hooper to make Poltergeist, and that's why it feels like a Spielberg film because they couldn't have it as a Steven Spielberg movie. He could produce it, but he couldn't direct it.
I think there's that aspect of uh, I'll put it like this: if you catch the reference, there was a Beyond the Thunderdome aspect to it, meaning there were two directors, two separate writers, or separate directors on Beyond the Thunderdome. If you pay this is what was brought to me up to my attention because you had those two people working against each other. You could tell which scenes were done by one particular person and one bunch of scenes that were done by the other type of person, the other
Right, but
person.
like when you
So you
watch Hooper stuff, and like Hooper stuff is weird. Like look at the
and
difference
with
between
when you watch
TCM and the second one.
Poltergeist, you could tell when Spielberg had his control. It's all family friendly, family light, and all of a sudden when Toby had control of
Yep.
things, it went hardcore. It wasn't just we're easing into the spooky. No, it's we're slipping this into from four gears. We're slipping it into straight sets.
So you think it was
So
both, and it was just them
it
kind
might
of
have been
running
a little bit of
conflict.
both. That and yet it was done so seamlessly. It's kind of hard to tell exactly. It's one of those optical illusions that, like if you went on Facebook and see that, is the subway going to you or away from you? And
Well, it's kind of
depending on
like your
how
shirt. We both know that Spielberg can do horror,
horror,
and he did Duel. Duel is an awesome movie about a killer truck. We never really see the truck driver, and it's great. Have you watched Duel?
yes, long time ago, but I've seen it. It's one of those weird psychological horror things that you don't see. Well, you kind of do, but not on that level.
So I was speaking of Jaws, I was watching a documentary recently on the shark attacks that happened in Jersey. I want to say around like 1916, 1912, that heavily influenced Jaws. Where it's still believed to this day that the killer shark that was eating all these kids that were swimming around the river was a great white. And it's beyond, I don't want to say cool, but it's beyond terrifying because here you are not living too far away from the ocean, but you think you're safe because you're in a river that's freshwater. And like at the time, a lot of people didn't know that sharks can swim upstream, at least within 2 or 3 miles of the ocean, because there's enough salinity in the water to keep them alive. And yeah, like tons and tons of kids were just destroyed by this shark that was just seeking out anybody in that river system. And Jaws took a lot of inspiration from that.
It
Now that if you want to remake Jaws, make that into a movie.
something that a shark attacking freshwater
Yeah.
in freshwater.
Yeah, but not the movie Shark Night that deals with like the hurricane that flushes a bunch of sharks into a freshwater area. That movie was horrible.
I, they'll probably do something along the lines. Oh, it's happening in Brazil on the Nile.
Nah, screw that.
No,
Have it in a big pop. Hell, set it right back in New Jersey where the actual shit happened.
right? Or
Give me some of them acid washed bridge and tunnel trolls. I'm all about it.
Something like that.
You can have Jersey Goyles running into the water. We're gonna get
Just,
skinny dipping.
then I want to see the whole aspect of them, like somebody saying it's like, but or from the like New York side of things, who died? Uh, Tommy so and so. Oh, looks like he's from Jersey. Nobody's going to care about him. Just walk out. It's
Just more
happening in
medical
Jersey.
waste.
It's just when it's from some New Yorker, we'll look into it.
You see, and that's the thing that I don't understand with Universal. Like, I get that their history has some rich horror, but where has the disconnect come from? I mean, I get it. I don't want to get into comic book movies, but I think comic book movies kind of ruined any other kind of dark universes out there. Um,
Well, it's not just the comic book movies. Comic book movies is the comic book movie aspect is the elephant in the room. It's the biggest tumor, depending on. I
right,
know some of you out there. It's not a tumor, but
but it's
it's
a
the biggest.
connected universe with several
It's a
different
connected.
series of
It's the biggest hit.
movies.
When it this whole thing, say it was part of the whole. If it wasn't for movies like uh, Twilight, Harry Potter, Lord of the Rings, and like that made franchises big, and therefore when you had movies starting like not just Hulk, but you had Iron Man, Thor starting to be big. Hey, let's connect this shit together and see
Right,
what happens. And
but
it just
here's my take on it. Going back to 80s horror, because believe it or not, there was a shared universe that was kind of going on under everybody's nose and didn't realize it. And it hit more than one movie. For example, Evil Dead and the original Nightmare on Elm Street, they share elements with each other. If you watch basically Nightmare on Elm Street, one of the movies playing in the background in Nancy's bedroom is Evil Dead. However, if you watch Evil Dead 2 and you pay attention to the shed door and in the basement, or the root cellar, as it's
right.
appropriately called, you'll see Freddy's glove. You'll see a Hills Have Eyes movie poster. I think the Hills Have Eyes movie poster pops up in the first Evil Dead, if I'm not mistaken. And the second one shows Freddy's glove. Then you had the Book of the Dead, in, of course,
Uh,
Jason Goes to Hell.
just right. The Though it was kind of confirmed in the comics in regards to that. Yeah, so after feel it's like, well, the first you can't really
But it was
put Evil
directors
Dead in the
having
whole.
fun with each other.
Yeah,
And
that's
like,
number one. It's like you can't really put everything together because the first Evil Dead was shown in Nightmare on Elm Street. Ah, but though you may be correct, they even Bruce Campbell has said because the second one, the reason why it comes off so much though similar than the first but different is because it took place not in the same studio. It's a different studio, and
yeah,
because neither studio
different
wanted to play
universe.
nice to each other, so they had to redo the whole thing from scratch. That's why the intro for Army of Darkness looks a little bit different than what 2 showed. You
Yep.
had to get people caught up, but still you do
Couldn't
the
show too
whole
much of the
thing.
original copyrighted
Right.
material.
But so therefore, this second Evil Dead could be in the same universe as Freddy and Jason, and
But the thing of it
because
is that it all started as in jokes between
right,
directors, like hints, winks, and nods. And with the right writers and people out there, and let me emphasize this, just having fun. And I hate to say it, fuck a franchise. Have fun. We can play Mary Hob with the canosity later on. And I think that is what will make it very, very interesting. Like, just let writers play and have fun.
now that's why I also would have loved to see in Jason versus Freddy versus Jason instead of the whole ending of Freddy looking at the camera and winking, I would have preferred one of the other endings that they had planned out, which I'm sure you know, right?
Mm-hmm.
For the folks that might not know, the Freddy versus Jason was a New Line Cinema film. Who owns New Line? What other franchise do they own from New Line? The Hellraiser
Yeah,
franchise.
because there was going to be
And one of the
Hellraiser in it
ending,
eventually.
and what they wanted to do is one of the endings, instead of Jason carrying the head of Freddy and Freddy winking, it was them returning both in hell to continue the fight. And you see two chains wrap around each, preventing both getting close to each other. And it would have been probably Doug Bradley at that time come out of the shadows and say, "Boys, boys, boys, play nice." Probably
Well,
winning.
initially there
I
was
would have
also
loved. The fans would have went ecstatic.
static, yeah.
I would have
But
loved to
like
see that.
the Halloween franchise was initially going to cross over with Hellraiser at some point, and I'm just like, that just seems weird, but okay, sign me up. And
Mm-hmm.
even Child's Play was supposed to cross over with Halloween at some point, which even also kind of makes me go, what? You know?
Halloween and Hellraiser, I don't see it. Hellraiser and Halloween and Hellraiser not so much, but Halloween and Child's
Child's Play.
Play seems a little bit more plausible in a way. Therefore, that's why I think, like in Freddy and Jason aspects, Hellraiser seems more plausible than
But I think
having,
it comes down to, they need to stop making movies for money. Get a good
right.
script from a bunch of writers who are having a shit ton of fun figuring out this bullshit and make the movie. I think if
That's
Universal
what
did
made
that,
half the. That's what made half the Friday the 13th movies. It was just plain, balls to the wall. Fuck this shit. It was made on the cheap. It was cheese. And the fans won.
ate it
The
up.
fans won. And that's why half the horror movies in the 80s into the early 90s were cheese. You had Roger Corman was a thing. Those movies were cheese out the ass
I
and
could
grade
tell you
A
now,
cheese.
and I would almost guarantee if like someone from Universal went down or over to England and said, "Hey, Clive, you take a crack at Frankenstein, or take a crack at who do we say he would work on? Clive Barker, The Mummy.
Right.
Have him
Mummy.
take another pass at The Mummy, and then get somebody into medical science to do Frankenstein, and then Dracula. That's where it gets interesting. And just tell these people, here's the property, have fun with it, and then come back to us, and then we'll figure it out. And then just kind of wink and nod at them. We want to interconnect these eventually, so we can have crossover films, but have
Or
fun
if
with
you
it.
want, tell we said Clive Barker for Mummy, right?
Yeah.
When they have that done first, have the Mummy done first with Clive Barker, then have the Frankenstein. Like if uh, someone does it, similar to how the Mummy was done in the Brandon Fraser, and Clive Barker just horrifies it up to the level 12, which he can do. I'm sure of it. Then, and when you do Frankenstein, you get that person with the medical knowledge. You put in touch. Well, there's this guy, and that's how you make reference using mystical arts and bring a mummy back with a ritual,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe we could harness that some same time, but with science. How and or getting that book and
I
bring
see, and I think that's the other thing that like Universal has a hard time with. They keep bringing the properties back into modern day. And honestly, if you keep it in the 30s and the 40s, I think it would work better. Because
kind of like
think about Frankenstein, for example. I mean, hell, look at Frankenstein's army. Because that's set during World War II with a descendant of Frankenstein making soldiers for the Führer, you know?
Or in essence, even though even though it isn't, it is. Look at Victor with
Yeah.
Daniel Radcliffe.
Was
It's
that
a in
Universal
essence, it's a,
also?
I don't know,
It might have been because they have tried various attempts to get a dark universe to happen. And it's so funny because there's like some of them they'll scribble off going, no, 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 that didn't count. Like for the longest time, they didn't want to
but
talk about,
I'm kind of agreeing with you. You have it. It takes place in that same time as the original
yeah,
aspect. Even I'm not talking about I Frankenstein, like, even though it's a decent movie, but still,
right. But
you
just
get to
have it
still
take
have
place
something,
in the same time frame, like the 30s and the 40s, or or something
or
where you might
or
have
run
somebody.
there where you could even pawn it off as a quasi. I won't say a quasi sequel, but like in the book, Victor Frankenstein in essence dies.
Yeah,
The aspect of the creature is unknown. Have somebody find Victor's notes, the story. Go like maybe there is a way to recreate this and go from there. It's just you have to have that right creator, right writer to work on it. It's different and unique,
or
and you have to have. I don't mean bring a level of camp, but you have to have that right person writing it. If you
because
have that right team,
all of the monster movies, at the end of the day, at least from Universal, have one unifying chain. The Wolfman, the separation of beast and man. The creature, which is kind of like the redheaded stepchild of the bunch. No offense to you, of course, but
none taken.
the creature is about the origins of man. Here is this kind of like peak between man and fish. No, we're not talking about certain rappers who would like to have sex with fish. We'll get into that some other time. But we're talking about that apex of when man kind of came to be, like the missing link between fish and man.
Right.
Um, with Frankenstein, understanding life itself. With the Mummy, life after death. With Dracula, immortality and the price of it. But it all deals with what it means to be human, because even the creature, to a degree, they try to make him more human as the movies progress, and they find that they can't. And the stories do have kind of like a unifying theme to them. And I think if they wanted to make a dark series, that's how you would do it. You would
You
find
have to
that
figure as well
universal theme.
with between Dracula and Frankenstein. It's two different ways of overcoming death
Yes,
in a
you
way.
have
Uh,
immortality, and then you have
Immortality,
bringing the dead back.
dead back,
And the mummy is kind
and
of the same way with bringing the dead back.
just different elements. One is with science. One is with probably with mummy mystic arts. Um, I'm not sure how
The
vampirism
Wolfman is
plays
just
into
the whole man beast thing,
thing.
and creature is the same thing too. What
So
what was our origins essentially? And I think if they kind of kept to that unifying theme and told stories like that and then linked those stories somehow, like right now off the top of my head, I could see how Wolfman and Creature would be an interesting pairing, because you have this conflict between man and beast with Wolfman, and with Creature you have this animal that appears to be man and is trying to adapt to man's society, and it's kind of a very similar tale to
and what I
Wolfman.
think it's not just that you're. I think we're overlooking a problem here. And one of the problems is and was, especially with the Mummy movie that came out a couple years ago, is that you have to have a director or a director and a producer that has a, a, a spine of steel or balls of steel to put their foot down. That
Mm-hmm.
means if the studio's like, no, we want this, no, fuck you, I'm doing it my way. Sit
Right.
down, shut up. And if one of the problems with the Mummy was Tom Cruise. He has to have pretty much. I want to be a 95% of it. I want complete control. You do that shit, you're gone. You're gonna
Yep.
listen to me. But I don't. Fuck you. Sit down. You're not the general here. I am.
But think about like with like the actors that were in the original Universal movies, they weren't names until after those movies.
Right. So try to find
Yeah.
unknowns and new up and comers. They
Exactly.
don't have that don't have that ego yet.
Get somebody from like small screen or stage, hell. That's where half the original actors came from. They were
Right.
stage actors. You know, there is still a healthy stage life out there. Grab them people while they're fresh. Let people cut new teeth. And then use all of your money in special effects and all that great stuff.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
still, I mean
The money.
the classics could be done again, and there could be a shared universe. It's like Universal. Stop thinking about making money because they sound like the underpants gnomes from South Park. Steal underpants. Massive profit.
And instead of let's remake everything. No. Well, you would have to remake it, but don't do stuff that's from like 5 years ago, 10 years ago, or something like that. Just go back. If you have to do something, do what a lot of folks have forgotten. Yeah, they live them again. What they them. Not many people would remember them
They're
that much.
remaking them.
No, they're remaking it. Though I might whine, bitch, and complain. Why not?
Yeah.
It's from the 50s. It's that far gone, but still, I'll be like, it's a cult classic. I'm going to still watch the original, but still, I understand it. Um,
Just don't make
one
it
thing,
like a freaks. That's all I ask.
no.
Please, please don't.
Um, one of the other movies I like to watch, I'll probably watch it after this, um, is When Worlds Collide. Love
Mm-hmm.
that movie. It's old school. Is the science bad? Probably. Um, but I do know part of me wants to search again for this. There's a sequel. Hear me out. It wasn't made to TV. It wasn't made for film. It was only in book form.
Hmm.
You could find it on eBay, but the book is $50 for a paperback that was
You
like
know,
50 years old. I'm not paying
that's
$50 just to read the continuation. And there's no ebook version. Somebody out there, if you have this book, find it, make an ebook. I'll fucking read it. I will because I want to find out what happens, and it does take up right after the folks land on the new Earth, the new planet. So, in regards to that,
I remember like the old grocery store days where you would go into a grocery store and you could find like a dime horror novel on the cheap. And like some of that stuff had some interesting plots, and I'm surprised like a bunch of it didn't get turned into movies. Like one of the ones I picked up, I want to say early 90s, there was a book called Carnivore, not Carnosaur, but Carnivore. And it takes equal parts of The Thing and Jurassic Park and makes a book about it. So it deals with these Antarctic explorers who find a dinosaur egg, and their research station has been overtaken by this evil corporate entity who has been using it to dump toxic waste out in Antarctica. And so they store the egg that they find in the ice beside the toxic waste, and it allows the dinosaur in the egg to grow, and it's just this ravenous T-Rex. And because of the waste, it has mutated where it can survive the temperatures, and it just goes on a rampage destroying these guys. And I'm like, I
have
love
I,
it.
how have I ever told you? That being said, I don't think I ever told you about the book I read. It's called again. It wasn't a dime store aspect. It was a Dollar General
Yeah.
book, soft cover book. Meaning you could go to Dollar General and pick it up for a buck. It was on the shelf. I was like, oh, $1. I'm picking this shit up. Um, it was called Zombie, Xombie. Basically, the premise is that the zombie apocalypse has already started and focuses in on this teenage girl, and she's one of the. You find
Survivors.
out in the book, she's one of the survivors, but in the book, as you're reading, you find out the whole zombie outbreak started with women.
Mm.
and it's majority of the women that get infected first. It's not just by bite or anything out. So you find out, well, what makes this particular teenage girl special? Oh, because she's been malnourished her whole life. Her natural aspects that would trigger at 13, let's say 13,
Mm.
to make a assigned female at birth go into menstruation and the whole ordeal didn't happen with her because she was malnourished. And as
Right.
soon as she started, getting the proper nutrition, that's when everything kicked in.
Mm.
And how she started to turn. And you find out the reason why the women got infected first in regards to it and why women were the um, start of it is because a
Patient
couple of
zero.
rich,
Yeah.
it was the original patient zero was a not signed female at birth person is because the rich elite wanted to be immortal, and the
Mm.
only create way to keep the zombie infection in check is have a pure person, and she wound up to be like in essence the queen of the kept in like a tank and control. It was a weird but interesting story.
Well, see, the fact that
If
they
I
they took the name zombie kind of upsets me with an X because like that is um a story by a guy I know by the name of James Farr, and it's about a zombie with a conscience, and there's a whole zombie apocalypse, and this little girl gets stuck in the middle of it, and he's got to get her back to the human settlement before the ravenous zombies decide to fuck her up. And he's just having difficulty dealing with the fact that I feel, but I can no longer feel because I'm the living impaired. And he has like these very meaningful conversations with this little girl, and because she's complaining about her head hurting, and he's like, well, that's good. He was like, that means you're still alive. And she's like, oh, do zombies not feel pain? And they're like, well, our bodies don't. And you're just like, oh, like, wow. And it's so deep. And you find out as the story progresses, there's kind of like a very H.P. Lovecraft, like other dimension that invaded us that caused the whole zombie
right,
outbreak. And that dirge, as what he calls himself, which basically means a mournful lyric, may have been one of their experiments, or may have been a doctor who was experimenting with what was causing this. And it's so cool because he runs across a mummy zombie who still has all her faculties because she wasn't of the elite class. She was people that was buried alive with all their stuff taken out, so she was able to reanimate. Plus a dinosaur zombie that had thawed out from basically like a chunk of ice.
a glacier or something like that.
Yeah, and they all kind of team up to get this little girl where she needs to be. And it's kind of cool, and they run across all kinds of stuff. But if you look it up online, it's like xombie.com. James Farr runs that, and it's yeah, he's even had people option him for movies, but he's kind of backed out because he's like they all want to adapt the story differently, and he's like, I'd rather see a straightforward adaptation of the story versus a bastardized version.
I know we probably don't have that much time left. Please forgive.